Okay. Hello, Uma.
Good morning.
Are we all in, Michelle?
Yes, everyone's in.
Thank you so much. Okay. On that basis, can I welcome everybody to this meeting of the South Wales Police and Crime Panel, which is being held virtually because of the coronavirus restrictions. Can I hope that everybody is well and safe, and welcome, as I say, everybody to this meeting. Just a couple of housekeeping points. In order to keep the broadband width at its maximum, can I ask everybody, when not speaking, if they could knock off their microphones and, if possible, their camera as well. If anybody would like to speak, if they could click on the raised hand icon at the top of the page, and I will bring you in to speak in the order that appears on my screen. And I think that will help me to have an orderly meeting. It would be helpful if those of the Commissioner's team, when speaking, if they could identify themselves, please, for the purpose of the record. Thank you very much for all that, and thank you for listening to me. On that basis, I'd like to start the meeting. So, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, Simon? I'm not sure if we have. I haven't seen any.
No, none being received.
Okay. I believe there may be one or two members of the panel having difficulty logging in this morning. You're on mute, Simon.
Yeah, Mr. Graham, Councillor Graham Thomas from RCT is having some difficulties. We'll try and get him on as soon as we can.
Yes, thank you for that, Simon. Okay, perhaps you could let me know when he has joined the meeting, because that could affect his ability to vote on certain issues. Thank you, Simon. Can I move to the next item then? Declarations of interests. Can I ask, does any member of the panel have any declarations of interest, either prejudicial or personal? And if so, can they declare them now, please?
Yeah, Mel Jehu. I declare that I'm a non-executive trustee with Safe and Merthyr Tydfil, which for some of its projects receive funding from the Commissioner's Office.
So that's a personal.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Now, hello. I've got a hand up from Councillor Bowen Thompson.
Hi, just to declare an interest, I'm Chief Exec of a charity, Safer Wales, and we receive funding from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, so it's just a personal interest.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Bowen Thomas. Okay, no other declarations. Thank you for that. Can I then move to the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday the 15th of September and ask if they were a true record, please? Can I have someone to move?
Happy to move
Christine
those, Chair.
here, Chair. I'll move. All right, I'll second then.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
We have 2 minutes that we have to endorse today. So the minutes of the meeting, Tuesday, 3rd of November, please.
Yeah, happy to move, Chair.
Chair, I have a slight amendment to make, if I may.
By all means, Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to note that the minutes say that there were no apologies given for the meeting. I did submit my apologies in advance of the meeting. So just to amend the record to show them I did send my apologies for the meeting. Thank you.
Yes, we'll amend the minutes as appropriate. Thank you for that, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Cowan, you wish to say?
Sorry, I raised my hand just to say I was happy to endorse the minutes. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Okay. They have been circulated. You have seen them on that basis. Is everybody happy that, or do they have anything other to bring in matters arising? No, nobody has. I'm taking silence as a no. Thank you for that. On that basis, then, having dealt with the minutes, can I turn to the Commissioner and welcome him to the meeting, and also his panel as well, all his, do you know what, I've got a complete blank in my mind. I must apologise to everybody at the moment. I'm afraid I'm having work done in the house, so if you hear any noises, I'm afraid it's going to be the workmen, and they just asked me a question. I lost my train, so I'm sorry about that. Welcome, Commissioner, and can I welcome also all your colleagues. Thank you for attending this morning. We're now moving to item number 6, which is the Police and Crime Plan refresh. So over to you, Commissioner, if you'd like to address the panel.
Thank you very much indeed. I hope you can hear me okay. I believe you can't see me because the the video is not turning on. I
Commissioner, we can hear you, both hear you and see you.
Oh, can you?
Yes.
That's surprising if exciting. Thank you very much indeed. The Police and Crime Plan, as members of the panel will be aware, is something that we refresh on an annual basis in order to make clear what our aspirations are going forward. We look forward 3 or 4 years because most of the things that we seek to do are not things that can be done quickly. They can't be done overnight. And the plan is responded to by the Chief Constable with the development of a delivery plan, which looks in shorter term on how to work towards the objectives that are set down in the plan. In South Wales, in practice, we don't operate in the way that was the theoretical way that the 2011 Police Reform Act set things down, of the Police and Crime Commissioner writing a plan, handing it over to the Chief Constable and saying, there you go, Chief. The cooperation that is undertaken by us is very much a partnership between the Chief Constable and myself. We're mutually challenging, but we share the values that are set out in the Police and Crime Plan. And I believe that that has been the strength of South Wales Police and the reason for its very strong reputation over the past few years. You'll appreciate that one of the elements of the refresh of the plan is the fact that we have a new Chief Constable, and indeed the panel endorsed that appointment at the recent meeting. And I must say that the handover has been very smooth. Jeremy Bourne has slotted into place as the Chief Constable, and his team has been seamless in picking up on the issues that are set out in the Police and Crime Plan and the development of a delivery plan. During the course of the meeting today, the temporary Deputy Chief Constable, Jenny Gilmer, will be making a presentation on the challenges and the performance issues that are being dealt with, again, that traditionally we have done in the December meeting of the panel, at the same time as setting out the financial challenges that we face, so that there's a full context in place when the panel comes to consider recommendations, the forward finance budget and precept requirements in the new year, after we've heard the level of the police grant, which we expect now to hear on the 17th of December in a statement in the House of Commons. The Police and Crime Plan stands on the shoulders of the previous plans, but of course it has been a very challenging year. It's been a challenging year, particularly for the health service, certainly for local government, and certainly for policing. But I think we can say with some pride that the past 12 months have seen an increase in the engagement, the partnership working, and the clarity with which we've pursued a lot of issues. I would say in particular that we've had an even greater level of collaboration as far as the ministers in Welsh Government are concerned, as far as officials of Welsh Government are concerned, and as far as local authority engagement is concerned, not least in the recent times with the creation of joint teams to deal with issues of enforcement and regulation in each of the 7 local authority areas across South Wales. Some of those meetings have been particularly positive. So, for instance, I think it was 3 weeks ago on a Sunday where there was change of regulation coming in, we had a meeting chaired by Julie James as the Minister for Local Government with commissioners, chief constables, chief executives of health boards, and local authority leaders. And I think that speaks volumes for the approach that is being taken. And it goes beyond just being the way in which we do business in responding to the COVID-19 challenge. It's actually building on the joint approach that we've taken, working as the Chief Constable and myself have done through the public services boards in each part of the South Wales Police area, working in partnership through the Policing Board for Wales, which met last week. It's chaired by the First Minister, or on his behalf by Jane Hutt, the Deputy Minister. And that meeting is bringing together some of the issues that are set out in the Police and Crime Plan as our hopes for intervening early, preventing harm, preventing crime, and the objectives of Welsh Government, and indeed partners in Public Health Wales and local government as well. I believe that we're developing a style of pursuing really important objectives that are of benefit in terms of preventing harm to people, reducing demand on a variety of public services, and performing constantly better in making the communities across South Wales safe. This week we have a meeting of criminal justice in Wales, which brings together the non-devolved criminal justice bodies, the court service, the probation service, the Crown Prosecution Service, as well as policing, again with partners like the Welsh Local Government Association and Public Health Wales, as well as Welsh Government. And that also is significant. It's been acknowledged by the Lord Chancellor that the recovery of courts, the delivery of justice in Wales has been brought back to a reasonable level much more quickly than in the regions of England. In fact, during the course of this coming month, there will be more court sitting days in Wales than there were before the COVID pandemic hit. And that is a very significant development. I join meetings with chairs of local criminal justice boards across England and Wales on a regular basis and hear the conflict and complaints about lack of collaboration, whereas in Wales, I can't fault the extent to which our colleagues in operational policing have been concerned to get things back on the road, and people like the Chief Crown Prosecutor, Ed Beltrami, and Luigi Strinati, who is the head of the court service in Wales, have worked closely with us, because justice delayed is justice denied, and that's a denial of justice for the victims, but it also undermines the effectiveness of the court system. I mention these things because they are all ways in which we're responding to the challenge of COVID-19 this year. But the reason that it's proving effective is because we have, over the last 8 years, been pursuing the priorities that are set down in the Police and Crime Plan and building each year incrementally on what has been set out in the previous plan. You have a copy of the draft. As you'll appreciate, there are 1 or 2 elements that need to be added to it. For instance, we consult the public on their views of policing and their views on the cost of policing in South Wales, set out within the document on, I think it's page 20. The consultation this year closes today, so the results of the responses will be analysed and that page brought up to date, and we will circulate the additional words to all members of the panel as soon as that is completed. The introduction and the background refer to the engagement with partners, the public, the latest developments in criminal justice and policing, and include the financial and social challenges. In determining the refresh, we've had to have regard of the pressures on policing. I'm very proud of the fact that we have not stepped backwards during the course of the COVID-19 campaign. Indeed, I'm very proud of the work that's been undertaken by members of my team. To take one example, which is a very significant example, the panel will recall that we promised to deliver the DRIVE programme of challenging the perpetrators of domestic violence and abuse. Even though the money that was provided for the pilot projects ran out in March this year, to continue delivering that in Merthyr and RCT and in Cardiff, where the 2 pilots were undertaken, but actually to extend it further to the Vale of Glamorgan and to Bridgend in March this year was our original intention, as reported to the panel, and then to Swansea and Neath Port Talbot in September. Right at the height of the pandemic, delivery in March and April was pretty difficult, but by the summer we'd caught up with that work, as well as adapting to a lot of work being undertaken online. And we have also in the autumn extended the programme to Swansea and Neath Port Talbot. We've also continued with the work on tackling the high level of drug deaths in Swansea and Neath Port Talbot, again in partnership with both local authorities and with the Health Board, and with considerable support from Public Health Wales. And that remains one of our objectives, to tackle the causes of crime, the drivers of offending, substance misuse, domestic violence and abuse, violence more generally, and of course the challenges of mental health. Mental health is a big trigger of demand, and we've seen South Wales Police improving their performance in the way that they respond to people in crisis, with the inclusion of mental health nurses in the public service centre. That has been a success in preventing harm, as well as positively reducing some of the demand on our police officers. And finally, I think in terms of the performance that we've seen over the past year, I think we can be very proud indeed of the way that South Wales Police have sought to use the 4 E's, the engaging the public, explaining the reasons for the legislation that's been put in place by Welsh Government, encouraging people to stick to the rules, and using enforcement without fear or favour, but only when it's necessary. And for that reason, the level of enforcement has been kept within reasonable limits, although clearly there are challenges where there are people who are either refusing to obey the rules or in denial about the nature of the COVID-19 challenge. As I say, the regulation and the legislation has been put in place by Welsh Government. That's a bit unusual because most of the legislation on criminal justice is national in its nature, established by the government and Parliament at Westminster. But because the COVID-19 pandemic is a health crisis, the legislation is made here in Wales. And that partnership that I referred to earlier, the clarity of regulation and what the expectations are, has been of considerable assistance as the police have sought to fairly and reasonably apply the regulations that have been put in place by Welsh Government. The panel members will have had the draft document, which I hope will have your support in going forward, but I'd be very happy to respond to any questions that members of the panel might have on the document that has been circulated to the panel in advance of the meeting. I hope that's a helpful introduction to the document, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, for that. That was very helpful. Yes, thank you. At the moment, I haven't got anybody indicating they want to speak, although it indicated to me before the meeting started that they would like to ask a question. So I will ask Mr. Ian Fox if he would like to ask his question now. And after that, I can see that Mr. Maljeo is also indicating that he'd like to ask a question. So Ian first, please, and I'll follow that with you, Mel.
Morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
I wanted to ask the question about performance measurement, but before I do that, can I ask whether or not you have in the past considered including in your plan the multi-agency public protection arrangements? Arguably, it's been one of the most successful partnership arrangements over the past couple of decades. And I imagine in your time in the Home Office, as I did, were kind of exercised by the legislation, which now requires police, prison, probation to monitor and map the most dangerous offenders. I note in your annual report you mentioned MARACs, but I wonder, given the importance of MAPA meetings, even though it's very difficult to set objectives against them, you would consider at some point in the future highlighting the really valuable work that these arrangements make on behalf of the public. It seems to me to be an unsung success story, and clearly South Wales Police, which pioneered in the late 90s the first MAPA arrangements. I mean, something for consideration perhaps in the future.
I think what I would say to that is that the purpose of early intervention, of prevention, of partnership working to reduce harm actually is along with cooperation, one of the golden threads that runs through the whole of the report. So certainly by implication, those arrangements are very much at the heart of delivery on the police and crime plan. I would the specific arrangements, of course, are very operational in their nature, and I'm certain that the Chief Constable would be very happy for us to put an item on the agenda of a future meeting to report on the current arrangements and the performance levels in relation to that, as part of spelling out of the delivery that takes place. I would certainly be very happy for us to pick that up for a future meeting. You said you wanted to ask about the performance measurement.
I do.
Did you want to say more?
Yes, please.
Before I respond, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 6 objectives over 8, 6 priorities over 80 objectives. I suppose in terms of monitoring or measuring performance. I'm wondering what sits underneath those objectives in terms of measuring the performance against each of them. I mean, in your background in the Home Office and MOJ, you know that the kind of addiction to targets and measurement and so forth, and I wouldn't want to add to your burden. But in terms of the panel actually scrutinizing the performance, the data sets, what is measured underneath those objectives? How is it measured? Does the panel get maybe twice yearly feedback on quantitative and qualitative data? Last point is, do you think it's possible at some point in the future to ever segment those performance data to local authority areas? Because I'm sure that councillors would be interested, if it was possible, in how PCC Chief Constable's performance in their particular local authority was measured and progress year on year.
Yes, I mean, I think there are a couple of things that are worth mentioning there straight away. I share your concern not to overdo the measuring of beans. I think there have been times in the past where the Home Office has become so obsessed with detailed measurements of things that don't count or that actually don't make a big difference. That's somewhere that I wouldn't want to go. Having said that, I think my focus is very much on what has made a difference. So we know what what we're achieving in a variety of different ways. How are we making things better? So with the DRIVE program that I mentioned, the question is the evaluation. Does that show that fewer people are injured as a result of domestic violence and abuse incidents, as a result of the DRIVE program? That is the measurement of whether it's successful or unsuccessful, and that evaluation is absolutely crucial. It's that evaluation of the pilot projects in Merthyr and RCT and in Cardiff that led us to say we can't let this go. We need to maintain this work and we need to extend it to the whole of South Wales. So that's making the difference and going in progress. The second thing, of course, is that there is an awful lot of data that are collected by national bodies, including the Home Office and the HMI. So the performance of South Wales Police against comparisons with other forces is something that is referred to in the Police and Crime Plan and which will come up later in the meeting today. The third thing is, of course, that we produce an annual report, and that annual report contains a summary of what we've been achieving. And finally, there are two elements of performance, if you like. One is the things that are done by the Chief Constable and myself and our teams as a whole, and I've referred to some of those already. The second thing is the responsibility I have for holding the Chief Constable to account for the operational performance of South Wales Police. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years, Lee Jones, as my Chief Executive, has played a significant part in improving the way that we do scrutiny. I think it's challenged the operational police leaders in South Wales Police in the way that that's been done, but it's also good that both the last Chief Constable, Matt Dukes, and Jeremy Vaughan have both said that they find that scrutiny helpful in that it challenges them, but it gives the opportunity of showing what their performance is. That structure, perhaps it would be sensible for me to ask Lee to say a little bit about the detail of that at this point. Lee, would you like to come in?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Mr. Fox. It's a really good question, and you're quite right. It's a very broad peace and crime plan, and therefore to track and measure without getting bogged down in just doing track and measurement would be would be very tricky and probably not the best use of resources either. So I agree with the Commissioner there. But what we have worked hard on over the last 18 months, in line with the refresh of the governance structure, is we've built in more formal scrutiny arrangements to really track the delivery of some of the priority programmes and the Chief's delivery plan, which supports the delivery of the crime plan, of course. So it's all, there's a flow there as well. So in terms of the data and the evidence gathering, I would say we're in a much better position to be able to demonstrate that now. And one of the things I think I brought to the last panel, along with the annual report, was a summary of the scrutiny work that we do. So again, what we can do, that's maturing. We can also bring more detail to this panel if necessary of the scrutiny work that we're doing. That is very evidence-based, so that can be quite data heavy. So, you know, in terms of, that's why the reports I brought to this panel are more of the summaries of the work that we're doing there. But to give you as reassurance in terms of the Commissioner fulfilling his duty of the oversight of the Chief Constable to ensure the efficient and effective delivery of police and crime plan, our focus of the deep dive scrutiny in particular, it will be around those priorities. In addition to that, there will be key emerging issues as well, with some of which this panel also touches on. And also within the governance, within the governance structure, we also make sure we utilise a number of other independent boards, whether it be independent ethics, the Joint Audit Committee. We have a resources board and a partnership board as well, which we either chair or play key parts in, or we have independent members chairing, which also help facilitate that oversight of the delivery of the priorities as well. So I could talk for a whole meeting on this, Mr. Fox, but that's kind of the summary in terms of what we've put in place. So if there's any questions, I'll come back to them, but I'll hand back to the Commissioner.
Can I ask
the final thing, if I may say so, Ian, is that it would be very helpful if there are specific areas of performance that members of the panel would like, whether for reporting at the panel or indeed to provide information to individual members on aspects that they're interested in outside the panel. We're very happy to to respond to requests.
Can I just come back on that? Thank you, Lee, for that clarification. I mean, would it be possible at some point, Commissioner, for an indication to panel members against a few measurements against each of the priorities, so we can get a grip of exactly what is being measured? I mean, I'm not asking you to go over the top and so forth, God forbid. But in terms of going back to your last point, if it was possible against each priority to have an indication of what is being measured, and then maybe the point you've just made about panel members looking at particular outcomes, because it is about outcomes at the end of the day. People are clearly interested in reconviction rates and offending rates and so forth. But as a panel member, it would help me to have an indication against each of those priorities as to the kind of thing that is being measured.
Yes, certainly. We can pick that up and produce something for the next meeting of the panel. And as I say, that I'm not in saying that withdrawing the offer if there are specifics that panel members are directly interested in. If you give us an indication, we will do our best to comply with any requests.
Grateful.
Thank you, Commissioner. You're satisfied with that, Ian?
Very grateful. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for that. I have now 3 individuals that have indicated they'd like to speak. So I'm going to call Mel J. next, followed by Councillor Graham Thomas, followed by Councillor Rhys-Lewis. I have another one. After Councillor Rhys-Williams, I will call Councillor Evans. Okay, so Mel, if you'd like to ask a question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. It's not so much a question as an observation. Along with a few other members across South Wales, I've been involved and was able to scrutinise your very first policing plan back, seemed a long time ago, seemed like only yesterday probably to yourself, 2011. And I know on that time, on our very first meeting when you presented that your first policing plan, I personally, along with a few other members, give you a very hard time in relation to what we perceive as your capability to deliver on your very aspirational policing plan way back when in 2011. And as the years have gone by and the scrutiny that was going, I'm delighted to be able to say, quite frankly, that what we saw back in 2011 are very, very aspirational, really high-level issues that we're going to be looking at in relation to, adverse childhood experience, reducing these key issues that we have in our community, which have a huge impact on our community. When we talk about safeguarding, I just want to say, and here we are 11 years later, and we're now in the evolution of this plan, and we've got 11 years of delivery, consistent delivery, along with you working with alongside now 3 chief constables. And I just want to say, I think the plan itself is a detailed document, but it's a detailed document which, when it's the point of delivery, is really having an impact in our communities. And yes, there will always be issues. Policing is a flexible business, as we all know. But when you can see the results and the fact, the commitment from your office and from the Chief Constable's office in relation to the DRIVE project, the continuation of the work we're doing on adverse childhood experience, the huge issues we're doing on safeguarded, put that alongside the advances in technology that we're seeing, the demand placed on our officers, and this year has been a year like no other, when we've seen demand that we wouldn't have even considered in a policing environment before, and then the improvement, and it has to be key improvements in our partnership working with health, the criminal justice, across the whole spectrum. And yet South Wales Police is still in the top tier of performance forces in the country. I mean, I, for one, Chair, if I may, and Commissioner, fully support the policing plan, and more power to your elbow. Be assured of continuous scrutiny and questioning, of course. But I think it just needs to be said that this policing plan, in the way it's been constructed and delivered, is actually a working document, and it's making a difference to people's lives in South Wales. So I just needed to say that, because I have been in a very fortunate position to have been through the whole journey with a few others of this policing plan and the work that's been going on in South Wales over the last 11 years plus, of course. Thank you, Chair. That was my observation. I needed to say it, and I feel better for having said it.
Chair,
Commissioner, would you like to respond? Can I say sorry if you gave you a hard time?
Can I enter into dangerous territory by correcting Mel Jehu? The first election was 2012 rather than 2011.
Oh, I do apologise. I used to format when you actually, the Commissioner. All right, then, I do apologise.
That's the
so
only
it was
bit
2012 then, Commissioner, that he gave you a hard time?
That's
yes.
Right. Indeed it was. And it was entirely justified, because the comment was that we were being highly aspirational, as you recalled, Mel. And I think that what has happened is that we're being increasingly ambitious each year. And the great pleasure for me is that it's not just me and my team being ambitious. The Chief Constable and the Chief Constable's team have shared those ambitions. And the second element that I think we should be proud of is that very often police forces are exceptional at one or two things, and that means that they're not as good at other things. And it's a great credit to the 3 successive Chief Constables that we've had during that period, that the balance has been maintained. We're ambitious in terms of preventing harm, of those early interventions and things like that, but also very ambitious in terms of the quality of response. And that's reflected in the Inspectorate's reports on, if you like, more traditional measurements of policing success. So I'm grateful to Mel for his comments, and I believe that the panel actually, by challenging us, as Mel says, in 2012 and ever since, Ian's given a good example today, are actually helping us to maintain that progress. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would tend to agree with you. I do believe that the performance of the panel is very good at the moment. And I'm sure that you would agree with me, that's down to the member of the panel itself. Okay, Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? I'm on
Yes,
via mobile phone.
Loud and clear.
I'll have a question for the Chair at the end of this, but first of all, to the Commissioner, the report that you've circulated on page 19, and I'm aware we don't have a crystal ball, but one important factor is going to be the financing of our service, as with any other service. And you've highlighted on page the roughly a third has been cut from the money that used to come in from the police grant from the Home Office there. As with most authorities, you're looking at your savings. You call transformative savings within the report, with we normally refer to as efficiency savings. There's only so much that can be done given the amount of savings that have been done over years, and also taking into account that to continually increase a precept way over and above inflation, continuing with that is not a sustainable model for financing, because it would become unaffordable. So what representations are we making to highlight this, even with the last settlement where we had the extra police officers that were replacing the cut of previous years? That wasn't fully funded, hence we had to push up the precept. But the point is that's not sustainable as a model going forward. And are we making representations to highlight that point? My question then to the Chair is, I keep getting messages flashed up that I have just joined the meeting. I had trouble joining. I'm now in via mobile phone. I actually came in at 10:48. Am I then able to vote on this part of the meeting, given that I've had the report in advance and I'm fully conversant with the report? Thank you.
Commissioner, do you mind if I come in on that first?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to defer to the legal officer on this, Simon. I think I was informed as soon as Councillor Thomas did join the meeting, and I'm quite happy to allow Councillor Thomas to vote on this issue on the basis that his inability to join the meeting was not particularly his fault. And I do feel that because the agenda was passed out in advance and he had advanced knowledge of what was going to be discussed, I do feel that a certain amount of levity should be in here on the basis that we are in some very strange times. But I'm quite prepared to bow to your advice on this.
Thank you, Chair. I think ultimately it's a case for Councillor Thomas to decide himself. I think if you think, Councillor Thomas, you have the gist of what's being said, you've read the papers, it's a matter for you. So yeah, I'm not going to advise you not to vote. I don't think this is a situation where votes are critical, as in some instances here. But no, my view is, if you think you've got the gist of this, then yeah, crack on.
Thank you very much, Simon. And as Simon said, I'm quite happy to allow the vote, because at the end of the day, this is an endorsement of the police plan, the policing plan. So rest assured, Councillor Thomas, I'm quite happy for you to join the vote later. Commissioner, please.
Thank you.
Interrupt you.
Yes, I think if Councillor Thomas will allow me, I'll be fairly brief on this, because we're going to have a presentation on the next item of the challenges that are faced, both in terms of demand on South Wales Police and then on the current financial situation. But I think you're absolutely right that you can only go so far in terms of efficiency savings to the point where the savings become inefficient. So, for instance, if we were forced by the nature of the finances to put some of the tasks that are undertaken by non-warranted officers to be done by police officers, that would not be a very efficient way of supporting frontline policing. That's one example. If we were to find ourselves unable to provide our police officers with the electronic devices that increase the work that they can do, that would not be very efficient. And yet, at the end of the day, the most important place in which we put money is in our people. You referred to the fact that we're getting an increase in police numbers. There are two elements to that. One is that it will take us close to nearly the level of police officers that South Wales Police had 10 years ago, but it won't quite bring us back to that level. So it's still not as large a workforce as it was then, and certainly there have been considerable cuts in police staff numbers during that period of time. The Home Office is, in fairness, giving the money for paying the additional police officers that they are requiring us to take on. The problem is they are not restoring the level of the finances below that line. Is a great thing, but the basic finances, the level of the police grant has not been restored to the level that it was at some 10 years ago. I would absolutely confirm that we make strong representations to the Home Office, both the National Police Chiefs Council from an operational perspective and the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, bringing together across all the political parties, the police and crime commissioners and the other police authorities in England and Wales have made strong representations to the Home Office about what's needed in order to maintain adequate finances for the police. And it is certainly the case, as you indicated, that in recent years the burden has been shifted from central government, from the taxpayer, to local government, to the local ratepayer. And that is unfair on an area like South Wales or Gwent, or indeed Dyfed-Powys and North Wales, compared to areas of Southeast England, for example, that can raise much more money through a lower level of precept than we can. That is unfortunately a fact of life, and we are waiting with interest to see what the level of police grant will be in December in order to take decisions and come to the panel with our projection going forward. But as I say, there will be a presentation on the current challenges. So if I may, I will leave my comments there for the moment.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Okay, are you satisfied with that, Councillor Thomas? Yes, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Can I call Councillor Rhys-Lewis, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Thomas has asked the two questions that I wish to ask the Commissioner around the financial challenge. Just if I may perhaps add one sort of further question. I'm not wishing to preempt the report that we're about to receive. I know the Commissioner has previously referenced lobbying the relevant government minister and departments with regards to the funding formula, which is certainly to the detriment of the police service here in South Wales. And in addition to that, also the capital city funding, which again, I suppose we lose out on really in comparison to London and Edinburgh, obviously other capital cities in the United Kingdom. I'm just wondering whether the Commissioner is able to say anything further on that, whether there is any news or update with regards to the funding formula or the capital city funding. And just a further comment from myself, Chair, just to welcome their priority one, that is a commitment to community policing. I know that is something the Commissioner has put a heavy emphasis on. It's really valued by, I think, residents in our local communities. It gives the police an opportunity to build links with individuals, community groups, businesses, and of course through our packed meetings as well, although they have been curtailed somewhat this year due to the pandemic. But as I said, just a comment really to welcome that, and great to see it up there as a priority number one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Commissioner, is it fair to say that the capital city uplift would be something that's contained in the next item, or is it something you'd like to comment on now?
Not particularly. We did give some figures on that at the last meeting of the panel, and it's certainly something at my strategic board only last week. We went further in developing the case that we can make. What we felt is that right in the middle of the pandemic is not the point at which people in government are going to be all that sympathetic to the challenges of large numbers of people in the centre of our capital city, and many of the events, of course, have not taken place during 2020. But we're preparing during the course of the coming 12 months to renew our pleas to the Home Office about the capital city funding. The second element that Councillor Lewis mentioned is the issue of the funding formula. Year on year, there has been a reference to the fact that the funding formula is massively out of date now, and that it needs to be refreshed, and successive ministers have said, well, yes, next year. And there was an expectation that a refreshed funding formula would be brought forward as part of the 3-year spending review. Now, obviously, the 3-year spending review went by the board. We've only had a 1-year spending settlement, which of course gives uncertainty to Welsh Government, to local government, to policing, to the health service, and to everybody else. So that is back on the back burner, as is the comprehensive spending review, which would have given us a projection forward of 3 years and what we could expect to be happening in coming years. There's a third element of uncertainty that's worth mentioning, which is the Apprenticeship Levy, and that means that in Wales, the 4 police forces do not get the level of contribution to the training of police officers that is available to forces in England. I can say that was discussed at the policing board only last week, where the Secretary of State for Wales, who at the previous meeting we had challenged on this issue, has undertaken meetings with the Home Office to try to resolve that issue for us. That will, in the next year or so, reach the level of about £7 million for the 4 Welsh forces in terms of a disadvantage. So it's very significant. But those are issues that we are pursuing on a regular basis. And it's part of our representations to the Home Office about the way that we are being disadvantaged at the present time. As far as community policing is concerned, I'm grateful to Councillor Lewis for his comments. Again, I'm very proud of the way in which Matt Dukes and Jeremy Vaughan, not just as a Chief Constable, previously as the Deputy, when he led the work on refreshing community policing, has taken a lead in this area. As I say, it's one of the values that we share in taking things forward. The role of the PCSO, I think, has been strengthened and will continue to be strengthening over the coming years, in terms of it being a clearer professional role, if you like, concerned with communications, communicating to local communities and listening to local communities, in solving problems with local communities and empowering local communities to be able to do things for themselves in areas that are relevant to reducing crime and reducing harm. So that commitment remains as strong as ever, and I believe is standing us in good stead. And that is, of course, reflected in the document that is before you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, indeed. You're happy with that, Councillor Lewis?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
Bless you.
The last person that's indicating that they'd like to speak is Councillor William Evans. Councillor Evans, please.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Just two quick questions relating to your last response regarding police support officers. I've been interested to know whether the level of support officers currently within the force is of a level or above that we started off with, because I am hearing reports that actually the numbers of PCSOs in the South Wales Police area are diminishing and not increasing. So I just want some confirmation one way or the other on that. And in relation to priority 1, reduction and prevention of crime, I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask this question at the moment, but I will do. Are you in a position to inform me whether the South Wales Police attend and investigate all reported burglaries of dwellings? Or, as I've been given to understand, there is some sort of filtering process. So I'd like some meat on the bone regarding that question, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think on the second point, perhaps as we're going to hear from Deputy Chief Constable Jenny Gilmer on the operational challenges shortly, I can ask her to incorporate that issue. I do know that the level of response by South Wales Police is high, and there is one of the slides in the presentation which refers to the response level. So I think that may, Councillor Evans, provide some better meat on the bone than I would do now. As far as the PCSOs are concerned, the history is that Welsh Government provided additional finance for an additional 206 PCSOs. I think that was 2014 when that actually took place. So previously, the level of PCSOs with a ring fence grant from the Home Office had been 300 within South Wales. With the additional money from Welsh Government, we took the number up to 506. The following year, of course, there was a very considerable cut in the police grant, and it became unsustainable without cutting back severely on police officer numbers. And therefore, with the agreement of Welsh Government, we undertook to continue funding PCSOs at roughly the 200 level, with roughly 206 being funded by Welsh Government. So I inherited 300 PCSOs, ring fence grant from the Home Office. We took that up to 400 with the 500, and then back to 400 with the support of Welsh Government, and that remains the establishment that we have now. Obviously, projecting forward for 2021 to 2022 will depend on all the arithmetic we do. So I would defer an answer to that going forward until I come before the committee in January, if we can hold that figure. It's worth pointing out that Welsh Government has maintained its contribution at a flat cash level, so it provides us finance for somewhat less than the full 200 at the present time, but the support for the maintenance of PCSO numbers is undiminished. So if I may, if I'll give that as, if you'd like, a holding reply and return to the issue in January, looking forward to the next financial year.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Right, I have no more indications that people would like to ask a question. So on that basis, then, if I can move on, the next item is the budget and demand presentation. It's over to your team, Commissioner.
Could I just clarify, Chair? Is the police and crime plan then approved by the panel?
Oh, my apologies. Yes, of course it is. I don't know what I was thinking. On that basis, can I have someone to move the recommendation on page 1, please?
I propose it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Second?
I'll second it.
I second it.
Thank you so much. My apologies, Commissioner. I don't know what I was thinking. As I said, I'm a little bit distracted today. I've got this work going on in the house. However, that's no excuse. So
there's nothing like work in the house for
distraction. Oh, I tell you what, I've got no heating on at the moment, and I've got no hot water, and I've got very little else of creature comforts, unfortunately. Okay, moving on. Police and crime. The budget demand presentation.
Yes, if I may, there are essentially 2 presentations coming forward now. The first presentation is by Deputy Chief Constable Jenny Gilmer, who I very much welcome to her role. Members of the panel will be aware that she had the ACC role for territorial policing before the promotion of Jeremy Vaughan from Deputy to become Chief Constable was approved by the panel last month, and came to South Wales Police originally from a distinguished career with British Transport Police, including being the commander in the London area. So without a further ado, I'll pass over to Jenny to give a presentation on the operational demand and performance. And after her presentation, then the Chief Constable's Chief Finance Officer, Mr. Umar Hussain, will give a presentation on the current budgetary challenges that we face. Is that okay, Chair?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. Commissioner, can I just check you can hear me okay? Someone confirm? Yeah, fantastic.
It's fine.
Excellent. So thanks for the opportunity to present to you this morning about some of the challenges of 2020 and a bit of a look ahead as well for South Wales Police. It's been said already, it's been a year like no other. So whilst I'm going to talk a bit about crime trends, etc., I would caution against direct comparisons with previous years. Things have, of course, been very different. Can you just move on to the agenda, please? Okay, I want to focus as well on 3 key areas today, which I think will be of interest to the panel, and many of them have been touched upon already. That's how we respond to demand, how we work with our partners to deliver justice, and ultimately keeping people safe. I'll then move on to those challenges and opportunities that I referenced already. So you probably have seen this slide in this forum before, albeit with different data. We call it the river of demand. So just by way of scene setting and reminder, now 2020 has been described as being one of the most challenging years for policing since the Second World War. As like all public services, ourselves here in South Wales Police have faced the dual challenge of delivering our service at the same time keeping our communities and by extension our own people safe from the effects of the pandemic. We've had just under 200,000 emergency calls this year and just under 500,000 non-emergency calls. We deal with about 42% of all of the crime in Wales and look after a population, and I do use the words look after very mindfully, a population of 1.3 million people. We do that with the workforce, our paid workforce of officers, staff and the PCSOs. We've just been talking about but also an absolutely fantastic cohort of volunteers and special constables who really have delivered for us this year in ways that will become apparent as I progress through the presentation. So next slide, please. Okay, so again, just that word of caution. It's very, very unhelpful to be doing direct comparisons with last year, and I'll talk a bit more about those differences. But I did want to include for the panel some of the trends that we're seeing, some of what we've been experiencing, and you know, it's not all bad in terms of trends there. We've seen a slight reduction in overall calls for service into our public contact centre. Things like violence with injury and knife crime have fallen a bit, but ultimately, considering that the entire country was locked down for the best part of 3 months and then on and off since then, those reductions have been quite minimal. But we have seen big successes in fewer mental health detentions and a reduction in domestic violence and abuse. I do caveat that with the fact this has been a strange year, and there are some concerns about hidden and suppressed demand. Moving on to the next slide, please. The slide you're looking at here is an illustration of the difference between 2019 and 2020 in terms of our crime and antisocial behaviour demand. All the offences, not necessarily offences, all the reports that came into us about people breaching the regulations were classed as antisocial behaviour. 2019, the top graph, a relatively typical year. You can see that thick band of grey, our crime, with a much smaller band of antisocial behaviour above. If we move down to the second, you can see the difference there as crime dropped off in April and May. Those reports of coronavirus breaches escalated quite considerably. They did start to come down again, but what we can see there on the bottom is that crime started to creep up again, whilst we've had a steady band of reports where we've taken a conscious decision right from the outset to respond, to actually physically attend as many reports as we possibly can, because I think that's what the public, that's what the communities want to see from us. But as the Commissioner said, this is not about slapping fixed penalty notices on people left, right and centre. It's about taking the appropriate action. So just to be clear about this, if 2019 was a typical year, in a typical year such as 2019, would see about 9,000 crimes a month, topped up by 2,000 to 3,000 ASB. In 2020, crime fell back when the pandemic hit to under 7,000, but this was topped up by an additional 7,000 ASB offences back in April and May. By July, things had started to steady out again, but we're still trending above where we would normally be when both matters are taken into account. Next slide, please. And a little bit about our stance on enforcement, and I will reiterate it because I think it is incredibly important. We took a decision right from the outset to very much lean in on this and support our communities as much as we possibly could. We engaged, encouraged and explained the reasons for the regulations and restrictions and worked with people. People often very confused and frightened to help them understand what was expected of them. There has been now a downward trend in the volume of reports, but what we do see is a bit of a spike whenever new changes in the regulations are announced. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about our approach in responding to demand. Just move straight on to the next slide, please. If we had one ultimate priority, it's getting help to the people who need it most, and we are very, very proud of having maintained our record in that respect. We answered 99.3% of the Forces 999 calls. The ones we missed were probably people who'd dialed by accident and realised that they'd done that. and that is an incredible rate of performance. We covered the number of calls already. Those answer rates are incredibly high, and we are incredibly proud of them. We have invested heavily in that in the Public Service Centre, and it's something that the Commissioner has shown particular interest in over the years, driving us to continually improve our performance there. It did get tough, and our people were put under a great deal of pressure on a number of occasions. We had some of our busiest days ever this year, but by activating our business continuity measures, applying strict infection control and access restrictions, we were able to preserve our capacity. There was a question there about dwelling burglaries. Whilst we can come to that specific question later, this may well be in the context of the fact that we have changed slightly how we do things within our Public Service Centre. This is not something that's happened this year. It actually began to take effect last year. We introduced an incident response team, and we try and resolve as much demand at the first point of contact as we can, but I'm emphasising only where it's appropriate to do so, and I can't think of circumstances where we wouldn't attend a burglary of a dwelling. What we want to do though is get the right kind of help to people as quickly as possible, and I think sometimes people appreciate being able to have the issue, the concern they've reported, dealt with very quickly over the phone, perhaps in an hour or two, compared to having to wait a long time for officers to attend. And the officers who do deal over the phone, and we're not talking about immediate or priority crimes here, they will then assess as to whether or not we need to follow up with the visit of an officer. It's about making not just the best use of our resources, but giving the most appropriate service to our communities. There's some figures on the slide there. About 45% of calls, and that obviously covers a lot of ground, dealt with without an officer attending. Some of those dealt with on the initial call, and some by the incident resolution team that I referred to. It is a bit of a different way of doing things, a step that many other forces took prior to us, and we are, there's still some nuances and detail there we need to work through. Next slide, please. I'm going to move on. So when people call us and they're reporting an emergency, are we good at getting there to give the help they need? And the answer to that is broadly yes. There are no targets round about attendance anymore. There are guidelines and obvious reasons round about that. We get there on target, 15 minutes or under for in accordance with guidelines, 15 minutes or under for an emergency call, about 47% of the time, and about 53% on priority calls. But those sort of averages are there. If we could just move on, please. I've just covered a little bit more. Okay, delivering justice. So, how good are we at looking after our victims, witnesses, and taking action against the crimes and offences that are reported to us? This figure sets out some data collated by the Home Office that talks about South Wales Police performance in this way. So, first, for taking action on sexual offences, violence with injury, violence against a person, and fourth, on all crime. Our victim satisfaction rates are still pretty strong as well. We don't survey on everything, we survey on a number of key crime types, and you can see there on the slide that the overall experience of the police response on key crimes such as domestic violence and abuse, hate crime, and residential burglary is fairly high. Of course, I would like it to be higher than it is even, but I think those are pretty strong figures and figures that many forces would be very proud of. The next slide, I'm not going to dwell on too much, if we could just move on, but the word balance was mentioned earlier on, and I'm sure that members of the panel will appreciate this is not just about traditional delivery of justice through the formal criminal justice system. We work very closely with the Commissioner's Office, the two best known schemes, 18 to 25, and the Women's Pathfinder, to try and divert people away from the formal criminal justice system wherever we can. It's the best thing for them often, and often it's the best thing for society and the community as well. proper demand management, perhaps allowing people a few opportunities to get back on the path they may have strayed from. The Commissioner also mentioned, and I'm very, very proud of this, the leadership role that South Wales Police has played this year in criminal justice recovery. We were faced with a huge emergency. It was never formally declared as such, as the courts ground to a halt, as our colleagues in HMCTS worked out how they were going to continue to keep the court service running. We quickly engaged with partners, set up a group of very senior leaders that met every week, and as the Commissioner identified already, the position in Wales is way better than it is anywhere else in the country. First in the country to get our Crown courts with jury trials running again, first region to have all courts open again, and also looking to have a return to pre-COVID levels much quicker than other places. We played a direct role in that. We lent our volunteers to the court service to ensure that they could get their buildings open again as quickly as possible. And just move on, please. Some of the big hitting stories, many of which will resonate with those on the panel. And then if we could just move on again quickly to keeping people safe. So much of what we do goes beyond, sorry, just to the heading on keeping people safe. Thank you. Back one, please. Great, thanks very much. So much of what we do goes beyond purely fighting crime. Your panel members will be very, very aware of that. And I don't use the terminology non-crime demand because that makes it sound like it's some kind of inconvenience. Keeping people safe is absolutely at the heart of everything we do here in South Wales Police and will remain so. We recently reviewed our force priorities. We are working on our delivery plan to support the Commissioner's police and crime plan, and we absolutely will ensure that vulnerability and protecting people victimised by the highest harm crimes will be at the heart of that. I want to go through a couple of specific crime types, but again, a caution again, direct comparisons of what happened last year are a bit risky. If we could just move on to the next slide. We've seen a bit of a reduction in rape and other sexual offences this year against an upward trajectory in previous years. It's too soon for us to say exactly why that's happened. We believe there may be some reporting delays there, people who are perhaps not as able to access their usual support systems. The nighttime economy may well be a factor, but most of the rapes and serious sexual offences we deal with do happen within domestic settings, and we are bracing ourselves for a potential, I don't have a crystal ball, but potential bulge in reporting next year. If we could just move on, please. Domestic abuse and violence offences. We had a bit of a decrease in reporting during lockdown. That caused us all, the Commissioner included, a great deal of concern. The force has been incredibly proactive in encouraging victims to come forward for assistance. Very, very proactive right from the outset of the pandemic in making sure the community knows that policing is open for business. It's a key priority for us. The next one, please. Stalking and harassment. We've seen slight increase, a bit steadying off now. It hasn't decreased in the way many other offences have. That's because of the social media and online element there. It's often a trigger offence for more serious offences, and dealing with this too remains one of our top priorities. And then moving on to the next slide. High harm crime. Knife crime in particular is something that we know is very topical at the moment, and over the past 5 years we've seen increases almost doubling over 5 years. This is not specific to South Wales Police. This is happening right across the country, often involved in the drugs trade. The two crimes go hand in hand. We do have some funding to deal with knife crime. The longevity of that funding, I think, is in question. Umar will probably know better than myself, but we really are pushing as hard as we can to make sure that both serious drug offences and knife crime are dealt with. At the same time, getting help to people we come across who perhaps have a difficult life, are users, and actually the preventative bit round about drugs crime is equally important. I'll come back to that word, balance. If we could just move on there, you can see the drug market has has proven to be remarkably resilient during the pandemic. Quite, I would say, astonishingly so, but National Crime Agency did predict this was going to happen. We actually had quite a lot of successes, and I think the reason round about that was people who were plying their evil trade to our communities were more visible during lockdown, giving our officers even better opportunities to intervene. And we'll just move on to a final slide in possession of weapons. I'm not going to cover that anymore. Neighbourhood policing, absolutely, just move on to neighbourhood policing. You know, it just made my heart warm to hear such positive comments earlier on about what we're delivering there. You know, it's at the heart of our service delivery, community engagement, intelligence gathering, problem solving, and ultimately keeping people. We have preserved that model. As it says there on the slide, we've got about 80 active problem solving plans at the moment. And my role as a senior officer is to try and protect those teams, give them as much time and space as well as the skills they need to go out and make a positive difference in our communities. I've got to mention the contribution of our special constabulary. They have been phenomenal this year. Look at those figures, just under 14,000 hours they provided to support the force during lockdown. It's been an incredible effort and we're incredibly proud of them. Just move on to the next one, please. But we haven't stopped. We haven't stopped making improvements at an organisational level. Just going to pick out a couple of them. On the left-hand side, the move from 4 to 3 basic command units has been absolutely fantastic in terms of enhancing our ability to do partnership working. They're quite big BCUs and very different in some ways. It sometimes feels like managing and overseeing 3 mini police forces, but I think that's right. I think that flexibility to local priorities is absolutely key and critical. Technology has been a huge asset to us. We couldn't have predicted the pandemic, but the fact that we have so many people who are set up to be able to work remotely and work agile meant that we could flex very, very easily. We put as many people to work from home as possible. We haven't seen reductions in productivity as a result, and we're very focused on wellbeing. It's been a challenging year for our staff. We need to make sure they're as well and fit mentally and physically as they can be to provide the best service to your communities. So just key challenges. What am I worried about? What are we worried about next year? The continuing challenge of vulnerability. And I think that's going to be linked to that long-term impact of the coronavirus pandemic. It's difficult to predict, and we've asked Welsh Government through the Police Liaison Unit to try and do some predictive social economic analysis on things like mental health as the country recovers from the pandemic. Terrorism, domestic extremism, these have not gone away. The threat level was raised this year. Whilst we haven't had any big hitting incidents in this country for a while, something that we will never ever take our eyes off. We talked about knife crime and serious violence, drugs harm already. A change in relationship with our communities. We set out to make sure we got through the past year without damaging our relationship with our communities. I think we've done that, but it has pulled us into contact and sometimes confrontation with sections of the community that we wouldn't normally have a great deal of involvement with. And one thing at the bottom there that I'm very concerned about is the nighttime economy bounce back. I see that being a huge opportunity. I really want to see, as I know all of you do, South Wales Police get back on its feet again. South Wales get back on its feet again. And the nighttime economy is going to be a key part of that. You know, we want that to be a safe place and an attractive place for people to come, start spending their money again. But for reasons that have been mentioned already, that does come with an element of demand for us, unfunded demand. We often have to pull officers from all over the force to police Swansea and Cardiff. I want us to be a proactive partner in doing that. But again, a potential area of demand and challenge for us as we move into the next year. So that's all I was going to cover. I think I kept to my 20 minutes. I may have strayed a little bit over. I do apologise if I did. I could literally talk about this all day, but I don't know if we're pausing for questions now or if I'm handing directly over to Umar.
Yeah, thanks. I am actually going to, before we move on, open it up to questions from the panel at this stage. I haven't got anybody indicating at the moment that they would like to ask a question or make a comment. So I'll put the request out there. Are there anyone with questions? Yeah, okay, thank you. I have Mel, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Chief. Can I just make an observation, and it is a question. I'm very pleased to see that the Section 136 arrests have reduced by about 150 since last year, which is good, because it shows that the force's commitment of not introducing people with mental health issues into the criminal justice process is key. And it's never been more so key than looking at your final challenges for the force. And that which you just touched on was about the impact of COVID and the impact of mental health in our communities as we go out of COVID, if I can call it that. So I just wanted to make sure, from your perspective, there is still a commitment to not, what's the word I'm looking at, not introduce people with mental health issues into the criminal justice process where it can be avoided. I just wanted to make a commitment with that. And I'm also delighted that you've continued your community policing problem solving approach, because that is making a difference and it's going to make a lot of difference in the future. So I think there was a question in there somewhere, the Deputy Chief, but it was just an observation, and I suppose well done, really.
Yeah, thank you, Mel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to provide a bit of clarification on that, because I think it's an excellent point, and this is about ultimately the most simple level, doing the right thing by people. We now have mental health nurses within the control room that may have been discussed in this forum before. I think that has been an absolute game changer for our officers in particular. We send officers out, often young in service. They have to deal with whatever is in front of them. They're not trained to deal with people in mental health crisis beyond the very basics. They now have the capacity to ring someone in the control room, talk about what the situation is that's in front of them. That mental health nurse will have access to records. They may know what's going on with that individual. They'll be able to tell them about the best way to deal with that person, and hopefully meaning that we can deal with them in the right way, only detain them if we need to detain them, only arrest them if we have absolutely no other choice. It's been remarkable, and I think it's been a huge asset to our staff. It really has, and puts them in a much stronger position to do their jobs effectively.
Thank you, Jenny. Anyone else with a question or comment? I have no indications at the moment. So on that basis, I'll move on. Commissioner, thank you. Thank you for that presentation, Jenny.
Chair, you happy for me to carry on?
I'm happy for you to carry on, yes. Welcome, Uma.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I think we are conscious that we have some new members with us today. And as the Commissioner has mentioned earlier on, we have yet to receive the actual cash settlement from the Home Office. So what I'm hoping to do today with you is to reinforce the fact that operational demand does require money as a key enabler. And I think demand has grown year on year. And it's important to recognise that without your support to date in terms of the precept that's been a key contributor to our sustainability in terms of balancing the books, some of those challenges would be even harder than they appear at the moment. So what I thought we'd do is kind of refresh what we shared with you this time. Well, 30th of January 2020 is when we sat across the table and shared quite a comprehensive medium-term financial strategy. That strategy is currently being refreshed. But we have got some high-level data that I think we need to kind of bring to your attention at this stage, and then hopefully refine that position. By the time we get to the January 2021 papers, you will have another comprehensive medium-term financial strategy that looks at risks, looks at demand, looks at our reserve position, capital funding, etc., etc. So all that is on its way. So in terms of a refresh, we have shared this graph before, and I think, again, it's very useful to share it again. So what this graph shows you is the amount of cash that the Home Office has put into the police grant year on year. And you can see since police authorities became independent entities in terms of precepting 95, 96, the amount of cash that's been given to policing year on year has increased. And part of that's inflation and part of that has been genuine investment. But and it peaks really at around £9 billion in 2010-11. Then we hit the kind of subprime mortgage financial crisis, and the government is faced with £149 billion year-on-year budget deficit. And as a result, all the non-protected departments, of which the Home Office was one of those, started to see a decline in the grant funding. So year on year, the grant got reduced. And as we approached 2021, we were receiving the same amount of cash as we had received in 2000, 2004, 2005. So that took us back about 15 years. And then if you looked at the impact of inflation in real terms, we've been taken back in terms of real terms to the 1980s levels. So we're trying to police the street of South Wales with the same amount of resources in terms of buying power that we had in the 1980s. And clearly, you know, the demand and the pressures you've just heard from the Deputy Chief Constable are considerably different. We're in a different world, and yet the funding hasn't quite kept up with that pace. And I'll talk more about what that funding should have been like to try and keep us as a fair settlement for policing. So funding as a consequence. So this graph is based upon published data. So the blue line is, again, the amount of cash that the Home Office has put into the police funding across the 43 forces. And that peak is, you recognise from the previous peak, which was there in 2010-11. We've also mapped against that then the crime per thousand population. So in 2002-3, we had a significant amount of crime per thousand population and relatively low levels of cash funding towards policing. And as you see, as funding rises, crime per thousand population starts to fall. And when you hit 2010-11, you can see a significant improvement in crime per thousand population as the investment in policing is peaks. And then as the funding declines, you can see the crime per thousand population increasing. Now, there are a whole host of factors, and we're not saying there is a direct pound for pound correlation between crime per thousand population and investment, but that graph is undeniable, and that graph is published data, so real. On the next graph, so members will be familiar with this, but I think for new members, I'll spend a bit of time just explaining what this graph is. So if you look at 2010-11 on the left-hand side, we have what I call a balanced budget. And then you'll see the red line, which is the amount of reduction in the police grant year on year. So you can see that falling away. And then if you see from 2020 to 2021, it becomes more or less flat. So it starts to fall, comes down, basic line, slight increase, and then it's flatlined. The black line there is our inflation. So year on year, pay awards, contract price increases, national insurance increases, the impact on police pensions, etc., and national charges for capital, etc. So all those things drag our expenditure up. And that element between 2018-19 to 2021, some of that is our own early identification of vulnerability. So you as members accepted that vulnerability had to be tackled, and we increased our funding into that area at that level. And then the kind of black line continues to rise as a result of inflation. So as to try and balance the books, to get back to that median point there, we had to find £60 million worth of cash releasing savings on top of productivity gains, cash releasing savings. And the police precept provided the balance of around £57 million. But at the last minute last year, you know, we had the settlement really late. We lost another £750,000 on our capital infrastructure funding, which then resulted in that 5% going up to about 5.9%. And going forwards, our current medium-term financial strategy indicates that inflation, pay awards, etc., will continue to increase that line. There is a big unknown around pensions, which I will hand on later on, but that's the journey we've been on, and we think unless that red line starts to climb upwards, we're still left with the two levers that we've got, which is cash releasing efficiency savings or cuts now, because as one of the councillors mentioned earlier, and Councillor Thomas, I think it was, it's getting extremely difficult to continue to find real efficiencies. We're into making tough choices on cuts now. And then again, you know, as you say, precept isn't a sustainable process either. And again, we'll have to have some tough choices on both of those if the red line doesn't shift going forwards. So just to give you a flavour of where the £60 million of savings came from. So on the police staff budgets, we reduced the police staff establishment by about 25%, and that realised £20 million worth of savings. But that did mean that 575 fewer police staff roles in South Wales Police as a result of that. We also reduced the police officer budgets and establishment. So police officer establishment reduced by 10%, and police officers, that gave a £17.8 million worth of cash savings. That was 479 fewer police officers as a result of those measures that we took. We had a really good hard look, and I think every local authorities had a look at non-pay budgets, goods and services, supplies, and we continue to challenge that year on year. And the police services has responded through its own national bodies as well. So we've now established a national commercial board, which is going to take on board some of the bigger contracts that individual forces do. So things like vehicles is a good example. Buying vehicles nationally across 43 will hopefully derive slightly better value than we're currently getting from the frameworks that we already have in place. And then, as one of the councillors mentioned previously, we did also a reduction in the PCSOs, and we reduced the PCSO numbers as part of that 10-year journey by about 125 from a peak of 506. And then finally, in terms of those savings, collaboration has a part to play. And we are one of the most collaborative regions across England and Wales. And on a recent HMIC assessment, there is something different about the country of Wales that enables forces in Wales to collaborate. And we have delivered £2.28 million worth of additional cashable savings. And I say additional because we've still got Tarian and WEC2, some of the earlier collaborations that we did on serious and organised crime and counter-terrorism in terms of our base. So this came on top of that £40-odd million of the collaboration that we have across the Welsh forces. So just to give you an analysis of where we spend our money. So 52% of our budget goes on police officers, 22% on police staff, and then 4% on police and crime community support officers. So 78% of our budget is locked into those areas. We spend 4% on the estate, and you've had plenty of presentations on the poor inheritance that we had on the estate, and we've been trying to rectify and rationalise over the last 10 years, and that journey continues. 1% on transport, so we do about 12 million miles responding to calls across the South Wales Police area, and so there's fuel in there and vehicle maintenance and bits and pieces in the process. And then supplies and services, you know, so forensic sciences, DNA, goods that we consume, uniform, equipment, you know, the list goes on. All of that goes into that kind of 7%. And then we have a significant amount of national expenditure, so mutual aid, expenditure on national ICT systems, PND, PNC, national child databases, you name it, there's a huge amount of national contributions that we do. And then capital financing. Our capital financing now used to be 3 million, it's now £300,000. It is an absolute fraction of what it used to be, and it doesn't even contribute towards our vehicle replacement program. So the vast majority of our infrastructure is now funded by revenue, and capital is inconsequential. So when we're looking to see where we can find additional savings, you can see there are very few places left to go after £60 million has been taken out. And one important factor is the police uplift programme, certainly in terms of police officers and police staff. There's an assumption that when we grow back, that we claim the grant based upon additionality. I don't think it's possible to say we'll reduce police staff numbers in area A and then seek to claim uplift money in area B, because that doesn't seem to compute ethically either in that sense. So we are kind of locked into growth, and quite rightly so. I will defend having taken out over 1,000, nearly 1,200 people out of the South Wales Police establishment, and the demand that is inexorable and crime per thousand population, which is inextricable, I think a growth is now inevitable in terms of the Uplift programme. In terms of our analysis of police staff, I think this would be useful for you. So we've taken £19 million out, and you can see the vast majority of our resources are on the front lines. So the 999 service, 101 services, custody areas, investigative hubs, forensic sciences, DNA, scenes of crime officers. The vast majority is in those areas. There's quite a bit of collaborative posts, as I mentioned, TARIA and WEG2, and some of the joint issues on forensic sciences are all in that process. And if you look at the remainder of our police staff, and in terms of the HMIC benchmarking that they do for police forces, we're towards the bottom half in terms of our police staff establishment. So whilst every force has had to reduce its budgets and its establishments, we're towards the bottom end. So the reductions here have been deeper, I would advocate, based upon those numbers that you see on the screen. So in terms of our early indications of where we are in our budget recalculations, our current estimate for a standstill budget, so again stressing pay awards, prices, contract inflation, and some of the known commitments, £13 million. How does that compare to last year? That figure last year was 12.3 million. So if you just assume compounding of inflation, it takes you up to 30 million fairly comfortably. So some of the factors we have not reflected in there yet are the council tax collection fund implications. So you know that the current economic situation and the emerging economic situation is likely to impact on jobs, and those jobs are likely to impact then on the collectability potentially of our council tax across the whole, England and Wales, I suspect, and that impact will be different across different regions. We have yet to understand what that applies to 7 local authorities that support our precept, and I'll be able to provide that detail for you in the January meeting itself. On the Uplift side, our working assumption is that Uplift is fully funded, so we won't have to find any local funding to bridge the gap. Now, that is an assumption. Again, the detail will emerge later on this month, hopefully. The police grant settlement is uncertain. I think that's fair to say. But again, the current national debt currently is £2 trillion, and the government is spending £40 billion servicing that debt year on year. If our borrowing, if our creditworthiness declines for whatever reason, then the government's share on interest is likely to increase. And again, the most unprotected departments, and policing tends to be one of those, tends to be at the front end of those cuts. And you saw my previous slide where we were first in line for some of the cuts that were faced by public services at the first financial crisis back in 2010-11. I've also currently excluded any impact of COVID-19. We just don't know how much enforcement activities needs to carry on into the next financial year. We're trying to recover as much of the expenditure back this year from government, and to be fair, they have contributed towards the medical grade protective equipment, personal protective equipment, and we're working through with them on some of the lost income as a result of COVID-19 that we did. So the kind of policing the airport, we tend to receive about £400,000. The airport hasn't had any flights, so it's requested a reduction in our policing. And of course, we've had to continue to find out ourselves locally. So some of those things are not reflected yet into the forward forecast, into that 13 million. And then I mentioned to you pensions. So you may be aware that the Home Office lost its case on the transition arrangements between the previous pension scheme, 2005, and the latest one, 2016. That MacLeod Sargent case is estimated to cost the police service £72 million in terms of remedies. That's before you take into account the revaluation that's going to happen in 3 years' time. So we will have a share of that £72 million estimate in terms of our unavoidable costs going forwards. But there is some indication that the triennial valuation of the police pension scheme may well result, because of the economic circumstances, in a higher employer contribution from 2024 onwards. The pessimistic expectations on that around another 15% increase. So we're currently paying 31% of police officers' salary as the employer's contribution into the pension scheme. That could be pessimistically another 15% and optimistically another 5%. So though that's the kind of range we're currently playing with. So we'll know more following the evaluation later on next year. But just an early heads up for you, there's two components of pensions which we've not kind of got to the bottom of at this stage. So one further new pressure. So capital, as I mentioned, is about £300,000 now compared to £3+ million over 10 years ago. The emergency services network, so that is replacing the current analog police emergency communication system with a new digital network and digital systems. We already estimated a cost of around £5 million for South Wales Police, but we reckon that is going to be doubled. One of the reasons that's going to be doubled is the sets that go within the vehicles. The current estimate is each vehicle will require £3,800 to £4,000 worth of expenditure to fit the new digital radios within the complex technology that is with modern cars nowadays, and the equipment itself. So that combined cost over 1,000 vehicles takes you easily up to £3.5 million of that £5 million, which we didn't anticipate previously. And then there are some other core costs which we think will pick up around coverage. And so the level of coverage within buildings, analog does tend to penetrate deeper into buildings than digital does. I think you all experience that from your own mobile phone signals that you have. So we think there'll have to be additional infrastructure located locally to make sure that police officers entering buildings are able to communicate with the control room and with each other as well. So there will be some additional core costs. So we think there's another £5 million just to maintain a communication system that we already have going forward into a digital world. Command and control, our current command and control system will not communicate with the new digital infrastructure, and neither will our analog telephony. So both of those need an upgrade, and we think there's about £1 million of expenditure there in addition to what we anticipated. In terms of body-worn cameras, they are now 3 years old and they have a finite life. The batteries are not replaceable, and when they fail, then there's a whole-scale replacement. We took a decision to renew the license and not replace the body-worn cameras because the current hardware supplier has a software which locks in the amount, the devices that can store digital media onto their servers. And our ambition is to try and capture digital evidence, both from digital video recording from custody, digital evidence from the scene of crime, CCTV imagery from individual homes and premises, etc. We want to feed all that into a single digital evidence management store, and from that digital evidence management store, create case files to help with the prosecution case. So the current provider wouldn't enable us to do that, but that ambition will cost us at least another £1 million, and that will make us more efficient and productive and hopefully lead to better justice outcomes as well. And then finally, as Jenny, the Deputy Chief Constable, mentioned to you, we've increased our Agile infrastructure. So we now have 4,000 laptops and devices out there, which enable our workforce to work from home and from other police stations. That is a prize we wish to cement going forwards, but that is a short life asset. Laptops have a 3-year life, and because the mobile phone operators, providers tend not to provide the software refreshes on those devices, they have a finite life as well, because without the security upgrades, we become vulnerable and we wouldn't be able to support that infrastructure. So that we think is at least another £1 million. So we're looking at £9 million worth of additional expenditure. We can't do all of that in 1 year. So the proposition is to phase that over the next 3 years and spread the impact of that expenditure at roughly £3 million per annum. So that's the infrastructure pressures that I wish to highlight to you. And then if you look, this slide captures how we are funded. So currently, police grant is £161 million. Police precept is £144 million. We've had to take out £60 million worth of cuts. And then the standstill gap, which I'll explain a bit on the next slide, is £12 million. One important point to bear in mind in terms of fair funding is if that police grant in 2010-11 was £183 million. So not only has it decreased in cash terms, it's also decreased in inflation terms as well. Had it kept pace at roughly 2.5% per annum, so if we had not received a cut and we just continue to receive inflation-only increases in police grant, that figure today would be £234 million. So we would be £73 million more on policing if the police grant had kept pace. And it doesn't take a scientist to say, well, actually, that £73 million would have covered the £60 million worth of cuts we've had to make, and would also be sufficient to cover the standstill gap we now face. So this is all about the police grant and the amount of investment made by government towards policing in Wales. The final bar on top of that standstill gap is the uplift funding. So the current we currently receive 16 million. We received 16 million pounds for the uplift funding, and the police officer uplift program was originally 6,000, 8,000, and 6,000 officers, making up 20,000 officers over 3 years, and in addition 6,500 police staff. So roughly 1 police staff member to 3 police officers, and that's because there was an expectation that calls would go up, arrests would go up, investigations would go up, invoices would go up, goods and services go up. So I think it's all in line with that. And those were difficult negotiations with the Treasury, but then Treasury accepted those as benchmarks and funding. So we don't actually know what the funding is for next year. We've had the 136 police officer based upon a formula share of the first 6,000. The government has revised the 8,000 anticipated for next year down to 6,000. So they've swapped the 6,000 and 8,000 over between the 2 years. And there is indication that of the 6,000 officers, well, actually of the 14,000 officers that are remaining, roughly 1,200 will be retained at the centre to cover things like serious and organised crime, regional organised crime units, and the City of London. But all those 1,200 won't come out of the 6,000. I think there's an expectation they will spread them over the 2 years. So we think we should receive at least another 100 plus officers next year, and then obviously the 3-to-1 ratio in terms of police staff funding. But we will brief you on that going forwards. So I said I'd explain the £12 million. So the standstill inflation is 13 million pounds, and the £9 million worth of infrastructure expenditure spread over 3 years is £3 million. So that's £16 million before the Chancellor announced in the 1-year spending review that officers and staff earning above £24,000 would receive a pay pause, as they termed it. So they would not receive an increase. Our current calculations are that 50% of our workforce will either receive, they'll all receive the balance of the 2.5% pay award that was agreed this year. So the kind of police officer and staff pay awards kick in September. And so we have a 7-month effect in year 1, and then a balance of that 5 months effect next year. So next year we'll have a 5 months worth of 2.5% pay award to find. And then on top of that, then the increments for officers and staff, and then the £250 for those officers and staff earning below 24,000. So 50% will receive some element of growth. But we think that you can knock £4 million off our original assumptions for our standstill inflation of the 13 million. So that then gives us the kind of current position of 12. Lots of caveat, please. We're kind of working out the detail. We provide you with a comprehensive reconciliation between the 2 financial years in terms of where the budgets have grown and for what reason. That will come. But this early stages, I'm flagging up to you that we've got a £12 million pressure. And again, that compares with 12.3 million last year and around £11 million the year before that, and roughly 8 or 9 million the year before that. So we're thereabouts in terms of inflation. Some of the unresolved systemic issues, I think members have already talked about the capital city. I think the Commissioner gave a cogent response. If we went heavy now on a lobbying strategy, we might be drowned out by the current Brexit negotiations and the COVID pandemic. And I think the focus is very much still on those issues. But we are developing a really good case, and hopefully we'll be able to launch that once the current noise is toned down. The funding formula freeze, you're familiar, new members, we currently lose around £9 million of our funding formula allocation to other forces across Wales, because the Home Office has agreed to fix the amount of growth in funding and cuts on a consistent basis. So there's essentially been a freeze, so to make sure that no force gets a worse off settlement, they've frozen the allocation at, I think these were in the early 2000 levels in terms of the funding formula. The Apprenticeship Levy, so we think the introduction of the Police Education Qualification Framework and our 0.5% contribution towards the Apprenticeship Levy is about £2 million. We've been negotiating with the Home Office, and I think I've reported previously, we received £1 million. All 4 forces in Wales received £1 million last year and a further £1 million this year. So our share of that million is about £450,000. So we spend 2 and get 450 back. So that I think the Commission is trying to address directly with the Secretary of State for Wales now, because I think every year we try to get full recovery, and that has yet to materialise. And the capital grant funding, we've lost £3 million. We're down to kind of, the £300,000 mark now. And then the national technology impositions without funding, they're roughly £11 million. And so overall, £29 million are some of the systemic issues, because I would argue those national technology impositions should be funded by the centre, not being picked up locally, because these are national cases. Chair, I will pause there and happily answer any questions, and hopefully more detail will follow in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, good time to pause. I think I have one indicator. Can I ask Councillor Graham Thomas, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that the report really underpins my original question, that the cuts to the budget, extra demand and inflation really means that we need adequate funding arrangements via the grant for the future, because as the point I made of raising the precept many times over and above inflation is not a sustainable model. So that was acknowledged really within the report that was just given. But there was one reference made towards the end about future funding expectations couched under fix the growth in funding. Now, exactly, could you put some meat on that in terms of fixing the growth in funding, and how that relates to what we actually need or might need as we go into the future?
Yeah, thank you for that, Graham. Uma?
Yes, so I think the Uplift is trying to address the cuts that have been made previously, and if we are successful in our fair allocation, we hopefully will be able to reinstate a proportion of our police officer numbers. So if the Home Office is true to their word, which is they will fully fund Uplift, we know at least that pressure is addressed, and we can continue to fill the gaps that have been created. The funding formula was promised as part of the comprehensive spending review. We know, we've made the case, and everybody has stated that the funding formula is out of date, and that still remains the best opportunity to try and address the gap. So there's £9 million that we are currently denied because we're not given our full share of the funding formula. And if you looked in terms of our previous explanations, we have some of the most deprived communities, and deprivation and violence and alcohol, those elements tend to drive the funding formula equation. And we know that given our circumstances, there should be more funding coming to South Wales than currently does. The current indications are that the CSR has moved to a 3-year CSR for next year. So this is all about a 1-year settlement and a 1-year planning horizon. But, and I will say this, I think the national economic situation cannot be ignored. And the Office of Budget Responsibility is giving strong indications of tough central government settlements to public services going forward as well. That's just the way of life. And we don't know what the government will do. Who knew they would find £360 billion to pour into COVID response? And they did. So I think that's where we are. I think policing has borne the brunt to date. I think the government has recognised that some of those gaps need to be filled, and we need to continue to push that nationally.
Thank you, Uma. Commissioner, you would like to come back in?
Yes, very quickly. I think the point that is being made about the arithmetic being a challenge to the government is a good one. Frankly, over the past 3 years, the government ministers have made the point about how much money is available to the police, looking at the whole budget, rather than looking at what is made available by the Home Office through the police grant. And that's why I think it's very important for us to make it clear what a fair settlement would be if the government were going to not only wish for the increase in police numbers, but provide the resources to enable that to happen. The separation out of additional funding for additional officers doesn't recognise the squeeze on the finances of the police, which has been there now for year after year after year over the last decade, as is indicated in one of Umar's earliest graphs, which shows the level of money coming in from the police grant going back to what it was in the 1980s, rather than being at a level that recognises the pressures of genuine additional costs and of inflation.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't have any other oh, I'm sorry, I do indeed. Peter Curran of the Commissioner's team, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to offer some brief comments from my perspective that might answer one or two questions. I think that the first thing is the lead up to this 3-year process started last spring and summer, and the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners and the chiefs, because I was involved from a treasurer's perspective, were very, very active at making the case. So the issues that Umar has talked about, in particular, profiling salary increases over the next 3 years, because it did start off as a 3-year spending review. We were very, very keen that the Home Office fully understood and fully costed the implications, not just of our current force, but of course we're talking about Uplift. And yes, the government are paying the initial salaries, but as you can appreciate, those salaries can go up quite rapidly once officers start getting promoted. And the position at the moment is that there's no guarantee for funding over and above the base salaries. So we made a strong case to model what those salary costs would look like in 3 years' time. We also modeled the technology investment that Umar has spoken about. Yes, they are significant. The emergency services network is on the horizon, as you're probably aware, which is trying to bring a common platform across all blue light services. So suffice to say, a hefty bid was submitted by the Home Office to the Treasury, and certainly us as treasurers were content that all those issues, including the latent demand and so on, were picked up. Now, of course, what the Treasury decides to do with it is up to them. It's a shame that the 3-year was changed to a 1-year very late in the day, but suffice to say we have done the work over a 3-year period. My second point is just a couple of comments following the spending review.
as has been said, it's not clear exactly what the settlement will be in terms of our recurrent spend. There were 3 facts that were made that are certain. The first one is the pay pause or the pay freeze, which Umar has spoken about, which did raise a few eyebrows, and financially will only have a part-year effect because our pay awards are effective from September. So there is a 4 million saving, not the full year saving. The second point is the government is committed to Uplift, to providing those 20,000 officers over the 3 years, but only at the salary when they enter the service and not further. And then thirdly, again, Umar has touched on the council tax receipts. In England, and in England only, the government is paying for 75% of arrears are non-collectible, and local authorities will pick up the 25%, but there's a 3-year grace period over which that will be recovered. Council tax being a devolved function, I know the Commissioner has raised it last week at the policing board that he mentioned, and Welsh Government fully understand the situation in Wales, and they've been provided with the figures, and they are hopeful that the council tax reduction scheme that many members will be aware of in terms of wearing your local authority hats will be sufficient to cover. So that's a particular risk now. We are due to get our grant settlement on the 17th. As I said, last week's high-level announcement, it was too soon to deduce any savings, but at least we're grateful. You remember last year with the general election, we didn't receive our settlement until a week before the police and crime panel. And if you remember, we had to send you a provisional paper, and then I think we firmed it up on the day. At least this year now, we'll have a week before Christmas to crunch the numbers, make some sense out of it, and be able to complete this analysis in good time for the next meeting of the panel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, that's excellent. Nobody else is indicating to speak. I think it's fair to say that this is a report for noting anyway. There will be a further report coming up to the next meeting, which I believe is on February the 3rd. It's certainly in February anyway. That'll be the precept meeting itself, so we'll look forward to the presentation on that day. Can I thank the Commissioner's team for those 2 presentations? They've certainly given us some food for thought. Can I suggest that the members of the panel are sent copies of those presentations, please, so that they can digest them before the next meeting in the early part of next year. Thank you for that. So moving on, the next item is the Joint Race Equality Action Plan presentation, and I believe, Commissioner, this will be presented by Emma Walls.
Yes, indeed. Emma, as my Deputy Commissioner, has played a leading role in the way in which we've responded to the Black Lives Matter campaign, but has long before that been involved with me in trying to ensure that we get to the situation where we have a police force that reflects all the communities that are policed by South Wales Police. In recent times, Emma's played a role in making sure that we don't just look at race and equality within policing, but also within the wider criminal justice system, and in arguing the case for a single public service approach, in which she and the Chief Constable of Gwent made a presentation to Welsh Government ministers through the policing board. So without further ado, Emma.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Chair, and good afternoon all. So I think both the Commissioner and the Deputy Chief Constable and certainly Mr. Hussain in his presentation have already noted that this year has been one of unprecedented challenges and the impact is going to ripple. But I think particularly in terms of this issue, this year has actually brought opportunities in the sense that it's brought race equality to the forefront of public consciousness through a variety of events that have happened across the globe. The public have demonstrated their support and a real desire to change through various Black Lives Matter demonstrations, as the Commissioner has touched upon. And particularly young people have found their voice in this area, which I think provides some growing encouragement and confidence that there is an appetite to shift on this issue. Policing has and continues to be taking the majority of the media hit for racial inequality across public services. And whilst there's no doubt there are ongoing racial disparity and inclusion issues that continue in policing, it's important that we recognise that racial inequality in Wales is embedded across all public services and is evident in education, in health, as seen by the recent impact of COVID-19 on the BAME population. Its features in housing and employment. And I think we as policing recognise that in order for us to be able to tackle this issue, it needs to be done on a holistic level, cross-sector, cross-government, in order to see and sustain changes across policing. So you'll be aware from previous police and crime plans and the current one that's shared with you today that the Commissioner and indeed the Chief Constable has long been committed to equality, diversity and inclusion and have been particularly heavily invested in improving BAME representation across the workforce. South Wales Police have brought in a significant number of BAME officers and staff since 2015, and this has been supported by the introduction of its BAME recruitment team and positive action programme, which was sponsored by the Commissioner. But despite these efforts, recent projection research shows that South Wales Police BAME representation will still only reach 3% by 2030 if it continues at the current enhanced levels. So this is far from representative of our communities, and the BAME population is only set to grow during the period, which I think underpins the challenge that we face going forward. So this year has really presented a real opportunity and moment to review our ambition and our approach to tackling race equality across South Wales. I think it's presented an environment that creates an opportunity to accelerate change, whilst all other public services and institutions, including private sector, are looking at themselves, reviewing their support and understanding of race equality. And also, whilst we have the attention of the public, and particularly strong voices across BAME communities that seem to be galvanised to help us learn, but also to hold us to account. So in terms of this presentation, I just wanted to give you a very high-level overview of some of the action that we have taken in terms of seizing this moment and what we plan to do going forward. So as a Commissioner's Office and in partnership with the Chief Constable and the senior team, we have made sure that we've engaged, held engagement sessions with various members of community groups in order to understand the feeling across communities and what needs to be done moving forward. We've placed a spotlight and a microscope over our data in terms of understanding and scrutinising what race disparity and disproportionality looks like across the force. And this has been done internally and through external challenge and constructive support through community groups to better understand the issues. And we've also put our collective leadership forward in driving work with partners at both the South Wales and Wales level. So the slide you can see now represents the framework for our joint race equality plan, which I think is one of our critical and key foundation steps in terms of our ambition going forward. And this plan has been jointly developed with the Chief Constable's team and the Commissioner's team, with everybody playing a role in this agenda going forward. So we've set out a number of priorities in terms of actions under 8 key areas that you can see on this slide. Next slide, please, Lee. Thank you. So to break them down, in terms of benchmarking and review, we have committed to better understanding existing research and reviews that have already been undertaken. And I'm sure you'll agree there's been a plethora of reports published on this issue over the recent years. And we want to draw on what already exists so that we can take immediate action rather than simply undertaking duplication or repetitive research and reviews. We also want to understand where South Wales Police and of course our own team are in terms of officers and staff's understanding of racial issues. And I'm really pleased to say that the Chief Constable has over recent months launched the Let's Talk About Race, which is effectively an organisational conversation with the whole of the force intended to create an environment so that all staff are able to openly discuss this issue. It is only where we can have an open conversation about prejudices or gaps in understanding can we hope to address this problem. We've also committed to capturing and interrogating our data to improve our understanding of disproportionality, particularly in relation to stop search and use of force. And we're committed to working tirelessly to reduce this. Community engagement is critical. There still remains a significant amount of distrust amongst the communities and lack of confidence in certain areas of our BAME community groups. And I think it's been noted earlier on in relation to the general importance of local and neighbourhood policing, but I think particularly that plays a role in breaking down the barriers at local level with our communities so that we can work in collaboration with them going forward. I've already mentioned representative workforce, but we need to be more ambitious in this area. I've talked about investment that has already been made, but that it perhaps has not made the inroads that we'd hoped. So we're looking to introduce new measures of positive action in recruitment to ensure that South Wales Police can be truly representative of the communities it serves. And critically importantly, education and training, increasing understanding across the workforce as to why race equality is important, and enhancing force-wide understanding of racial inequality, Black history and unconscious bias is a priority for us. The next slide, thank you. So engagement and communication, we're committed to involving our communities in shaping the direction of our work and empowering community groups in terms of being able to make choices and to help us set a standard and also to act and be invited to be a critical friend. We want to ensure our communication is clear, that we communicate our progress and our outcomes, and we are transparent and visible and open to challenge. And of course, our work in partnership. We're seeking opportunities to collaborate on this shared priority at every available opportunity. And lastly, the importance of the Commissioner's role in terms of scrutiny. We're committed to continually delivering a comprehensive scrutiny programme to ensure that South Wales Police are held to account for delivery. Next slide, please. So we've touched on the strength of partnership that South Wales Police has right across our criminal justice partners and local government and Welsh Government. And I think the inroads and commitment we've been able to make on this agenda so quickly is demonstrative of this. So in September, we took race equality to Policing Partnership Board for Wales, which is a board owned by commissioners and chief constables across Wales and chaired by the First Minister and the Deputy Minister Chief and Chief Whip. And policing in Wales called for a one public service approach to tackling race equality, including movement on a number of priority areas. As I've touched on already, the promotion of Black history in education, multi-agency training right across the public sector workforce, enhancing the role of PCSOs to ensure and support community cohesion, trust and confidence at a local level, and a coordinated public communications campaign to attract people from the BAME communities to the public sector. And I'm delighted to say that Welsh Government colleagues accepted these plans of work and are working now with us to shape their own race equality action plan and to inform and commit to the actions that we will set out in our policing and criminal justice ambitions. So next slide. So following the presentation at the Policing and Partnership Board, we took the discussion to our criminal justice partners, who again absolutely supported the messages that we were promoting and have pledged to make race equality a priority for the board. In doing so, we are in the process of consulting with our BAME community groups in order to develop a statement, a pledge statement, and underlying commitments that we will take forward as a board across Wales. And in doing so, creating a mechanism, a partnership mechanism through a task and finish group in order to deliver this work. And I'm hoping that this will be ratified at a board that we are attending later this week, and that both myself and Chief Constable Pam Kelly from Gwent will lead on this work on behalf of policing and criminal justice in Wales. Next slide. So lastly, I just wanted to finish on a few considerations. So from the conversations that we've had with our BAME communities and through listening to a lot of the communication that's going on in social media and on mainstream media, I think we need to be mindful of a number of points. Firstly, I think the community are feeling both sceptical and cynical about our ability to deliver and to make change. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that challenge, that we make best efforts to ensure that we are visible and that we're able to better promote our positive action, even though those positive outcomes may only be baby steps. I think it's also important that we acknowledge that we're drawing on the same community groups for consultation, for advice, and that I think groups are consultation fatigued, and in some areas and in some cases, individuals or groups are feeling slightly exploited. Again, I think we need to recognise the skills and experience of our BAME colleagues and our community groups and ensure that we create tangible opportunities and benefits to them when they're supporting us in shaping our policy, strategy and delivery going forward. I've talked about positive action in recruitment, but this needs to be introduced into an organisation that is ready and that understands why this is necessary, so that measures can be introduced and supported and that we avoid some negative consequences. I think it's also important to note that we mustn't take our eye off the other minority groups and protected characteristics, ensuring that gender, sexuality, disability, etc. are all still maintained as priorities for us as a Commissioner's Office and Force. And of course, to make sure that we consider how race inequalities affect these particular groups in their very bespoke and nuanced ways. And I think lastly, before I conclude, we need to recognise the importance of maintaining this momentum. Our commitments today must be sustained tomorrow, next week, next year, and in the next 5 to 10 years. And in doing so, I hope that you as a panel will invite us back and keep this issue on the top of your agenda, in which you can challenge us, you can hold us to account, and you can feed back on the progress that we have made. I note that what I've covered today in the presentation is just a very high level and whistle-stop tour in terms of some of the commitments and intentions we have going forward. But I would really like this panel, when appropriate, to invite us back so that we can present our baseline data and some of our projected ambitions in a lot more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. As you can see on the screen there, are there any questions from the panel for Emma? I don't have anybody at the moment indicating. Yes, I have one. Hello, Councillor Bowen Thomas, please.
Hi Emma, thank you for that. I really welcome it. I'd be keen to know when you think would be a good realistic time to get that baseline information and be able to get an update, because obviously I think it is important that we get to look at the plan and scrutinise it, and I'd really welcome the opportunity to, but at the same time I want to make sure that we do it at a time that is realistic and worthwhile in terms of you being able to show some real evidence of what started to happen and what you want to see going forward with the vision.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen Thompson. Well, I would be more than happy if there was space on the agenda in the new year to bring back the copy of the draft joint race equality action plan, and I think that we will already have some further progress to report on by way of partnership developments and planned activity. I think we could then take a view as to when we start to produce more data on a thematic basis. And again, I'd be more than happy if this panel wish to keep this particular issue on as a standing agenda item, to return every time the panel sits to pick up a particular area of race equality so that we can report back to you.
I've got to say, I'd really welcome that. I'd really welcome it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm quite happy for that as well. Councillor Peter Rees, please.
Can I follow on from Bernie's comments and ask Emma, does that include the Gypsy Traveller and the Gypsy Travellers and associations as well?
Yes, it does, Councillor Rees.
Okay, thank you. No more indications. Thank you for that presentation, Emma. And again, this was a report really for noting, so there's no need for a vote on this. So if I can move on, please, to the update on police conduct. Commissioner, please.
Thank you very much indeed. This is an item that was requested for information to the panel. On February the 1st, 2020, phase 3 of the new legislative framework governing the police complaint and conduct system came into force. There'd been something of a delay in finalising the new arrangements that the Home Office had brought in, and a report has been circulated with the agenda, which gives some details of the work of the Professional Standards Department. As indicated earlier in terms of scrutiny work, my Chief Executive, Lee Jones, has played a significant part in developing the high standard of work that we undertake with the Professional Standards Department. I think it's fair to say every now and then there are issues which are historic in South Wales, which come back to the headlines. We saw that with the Clydach murders being a matter of focus on BBC Wales television a few weeks ago. There's frequently a reference back to the Lynette White murder, something that I'm very familiar with because that murder took place in the Butetown area, where only a year earlier I'd been a community worker. It happened a year after I was elected to Parliament, so it's a community that I know very, very well. We've had the Cardiff Newsagents 3. And I think the fact that those events took place in South Wales and raised questions about the quality of policing and investigations at that time is always there as a reminder to us. As a Member of Parliament, I took an interest in the way that those things happen, particularly raising issues about the investigations of the Lynette White murder. What I've seen in recent times is 5 successive chief constables who have a very high commitment to following the evidence wherever it leads, rather than being defensive about the reputation of the police. And I think that has led to a significant development of the professionalism with which professional standards are maintained and complaints are dealt with. Perhaps because of these changes that have taken place and the role that Lee has played in implementing the increased role of the Police and Crime Commissioner and of my team in the complaints process, can I ask Lee to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, panel. As you can see, there is a cover report and a summary report from the Professional Standards Department in response to what has been put in place in relation to the changes to around police conduct. Obviously, there's an overlap slightly, and maybe the language in legislation sometimes isn't always as clear as it could be. Own personal view, but we're talking about conduct and not complaints here. There are additional responsibilities, as the Commissioner has pointed out, and an additional role for the Commissioner or myself on behalf of the Commissioner in terms of the complaints process and being the final point of contact for a review, in layman's terms, appeals. But in relation to conduct, the report that's been produced by Professional Standards Department summarises the process that we should follow following the changes to the legislation. Although, to be fair to South Wales Police and its professional standards, they always had a very structured approach to this. Over the last few years, there has been an excellent relationship, a very professional relationship between the Commissioner's office and the professional standards team. Obviously, where appropriate, there needs to be that sterile corridor between the two of us as well. But the report really is a brief summary, and I do appreciate there is a little bit of reference to the legislation and legal language. So I won't go through in huge detail because the panel have got the report there. But it is a note in response to the query that was raised. So I hope that you find that helpful. It is a brief update on conduct. You have to remember, obviously, as I just mentioned, that we have an oversight role and work closely with the Professional Standards Department, but there is also, in relation to some specific issues as they may emerge, we also have Her Majesty's Inspectorate have also inspected around issues around professional standards departments and certain aspects of police conduct. The focus of the report is on conduct matters, not complaints, and the process undertaken by professional standards. Obviously, in terms of some of the issues they're dealing with, they are a sensitive and/or confidential nature, so that the detail of specific investigations wouldn't be appropriate for this moment in time. Although, if necessary, we can come back and look at detail of certain themes if that would be of interest. There's reference to trying to define more clearly what is misconduct and what is gross misconduct. And that's a reference to the Police Conduct Regulations 2020. How there's also improved, or we try to highlight as well, awareness of how throughout the force you can refer to, or from externally you can refer into professional standards or into the police and any issues that may relate to police conduct. There is, in terms of the investigation process, that is summarised there. There's a process is very thorough in terms of allocation, assessment, and then the investigation that is laid out within the report. And then at the end, there is a summary of the sort of broad line figures in relation to the number of cases that we've had since February, since the changes. And I know the panel have previously, for example, also had a bit more detail in terms of some action that have been taken by professional standards in conjunction with ourselves to monitor activity, identify trends, really look at areas of maybe training or where there may be issues which need further investigation or development further. There's systems in place. There's been specific operations. I think in January we made reference to Operation Waterloo, which was so the Professional Standards Department and the also ensure that they're not just waiting for issues to come in, that they are being proactive. We also, as the Commissioner has stated as well, where we will utilise evidence we will dip sample complaints and practices and information that the Professional Standards Department have. And if there's an area for further scrutiny or areas of concern which are emerging or certain patterns emerging, then we will look to identify or carry out further scrutiny there. So I'll pause there just because I'm conscious of it's been a long meeting, so rather than me waffle on, I will pause there to see if there's any specific questions that you may have.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a few indicating that they'd like to speak. So I know, Simon, I know that you wanted to come in on this as well, but do you mind, in the first instance, I'd like to take the questions from the panel members, if that's okay. So can I ask Mel, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report, Lee. It's just a very simple question for me. The document refers to the appropriate authority. Now, just to make sure all panel members are aware, in my day in the police, the appropriate authority was the Chief Constable. Has that changed with the advent of the Commissioner's role? Who is the appropriate authority for the purposes of this particular document on conduct?
Yes, thank you, Mel. Good question. Sorry, this is an assumption, isn't there, of knowledge there. I should have clarified that. On the whole, yes, it's still the same position that for investigations against members of the police force, it would be the chief constable would be. Obviously, he tends to delegate that down to one of his chief officer team, or depending on the rank of the officer involved, that may be the conduct case. So obviously, it has to be appropriate to that level. So it could be different ranks depending on the severity of the offence. If it is one of the senior ranks, so chief constable or one of the chief officer team, it may well be then the appropriate body would be the commissioner. And obviously, if there is a complaint about the commissioner, then yourselves are the appropriate body. So the definition can change depending on the severity and the rank of the officer involved.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much. Chair, I have to leave the meeting at this stage. Is that appropriate?
I think you're on mute, Councillor Young.
Thank you for that. You think I learned by now? Mel, thank you very much for your contribution today. Please feel free to go. Have a good Christmas and wish your family all the best. Thank you for that.
Same to you, and the same to everyone who's in the meeting today. Best wishes to all. Take care.
Take care now. Councillor Christine Richards, please.
Sorry, trying to unmute. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lee and Commissioner, for this report. Quite a simple question from me, actually. In the report, it tells us that since February there've been 114 referrals. That 11 have gone to misconduct hearings and 40 to reflective practice reviews, which in my estimation leaves 63 cases. You go on to say that some of these cases are complex and some will show no wrongdoing. I was just wondering whether there was any indication what the split between no wrongdoing and complex cases on the 63 remaining cases is. Is there a huge amount of either, or yeah? Some more clarity on that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. If I'm honest, I don't have the exact breakdown of that of those cases, but it's a good question, and if it's okay, I will check on what that split is, and I'll provide an answer to Simon so we can come back to you, rather than speculate, if that's okay, because I don't have the exact figures. A lot of it, some of those might well be ongoing cases as well, and the complex nature can mean that some cases may, of those 63, you're quite right, could evolve into being misconduct hearings. Others won't. They might be effective practices. Whether there's one of the other things I've noted from this as well, which may be of interest, is with those as well, it would be interesting to see if there's any themes emerging in terms of cases as well. So it's a very good question. Apologies that I don't have the breakdown of those 63, but I'm sure I can establish that for you, give you a bit of an overview, and come back to the panel if that's okay.
Okay, yes, certainly. Thank you, Lee.
That's that, Lee. Simon, I know you wanted to come in on this. Would you like to come in now, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We got a couple of questions which we normally would deal with at the beginning of the agenda, but as they were linked to conduct and standards, it seemed appropriate to raise them at this stage. There are two questions from me, Mr. Jenkins. I'll see if I can share the document to the screen. If I can't, I'll simply read the questions out. Let's have a look. That may be it there. Is that coming up on your screens? Is anything there?
Yeah, that's fine, Simon. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. You can see a handwritten letter, can you?
Indeed.
Okay, this is the first question he asked, which came in September. And what he's saying here is, I attach copies of newspaper articles Now, Mr. Jenkins has written to the panel and asked questions of the panel before, so he's referring to the previous questions he's made there. So I attached copies of newspaper articles of more examples of police dishonesty and inappropriate behaviour of PC Sally Thomas. Did not display the high standards of professional behaviour expected of police officers by making false account during her interview with our investigators. That's in question marks and taken from a newspaper cutting. It says, in circumstances such as this, should previous cases in which the discredited officer's evidence contributed to a conviction be automatically overturned? The evidence is given by the officer has now been compromised by their proven worthiness. If this is not already done, should it be introduced as a policy in order to provide true justice? Is Alan Michael happy that PC Gemma Dix, who gave Sergeant Adam Reed oral sex, remains a police officer? And as she has set the standard of what is acceptable behaviour, are you surprised that many members of the public have little or no respect for South Wales Police? Behind that, then, he's sent in cuttings. This is the South Wales Echo back on the 20th of July this year. PCU gave false details after arrest is dismissed. So that's the first thing he's referring to. Echo again back in June. Cop ran business while getting sick pay from the force. And then he goes on to the sexual allegations against the police officers, Gemma Dixon, Adam Reed. Again, all cuttings from the local paper. Sex Act police officer waits to learn her fate. Hearing is told of police officer's clumsy affair. And PC performed sex acts with sergeant at the police station. Finishing up another article in relation to that matter. So that was the first question that he asked. And then he followed that up with a second letter in December. Another question to be asked in the meeting on the 8th of December to Alan Michael, PC Commissioner. And this is in relation to the prosecution of Jeremy Fowler and Matthew Davis. He says, you informed me that the Professional Standards Department and the Chief Constable were bitterly disappointed by the not guilty verdicts that were found in court. And I think this comes from a letter that the Commissioner sent to Mr. Jenkins. He says, are you happy that the two officers who you described as officers who have betrayed the trust of the public and their colleagues remain as serving police officers? And if you feel the expense of all this case was taxpayers' money well spent? He then goes on to set out the letter that Mr. Jenkins had received from the Commissioner, and in that he's underlined something the Commissioner has written. The Professional Standards Department and the Chief Constable were bitterly disappointed by the not guilty verdicts that were found in court. He's then boxed this part. Disciplinary action is ongoing against the officers. In due course, they will face a gross misconduct hearing. They were found not guilty in criminal offence, but that does not prevent them from being subject to internal disciplinary processes. Indeed, the article that you affixed to your letter outlines the next steps that are being taken. And this is the part that he referred to in his letter. It says the fact that the officers have pursued the investigations leading to prosecutions against officers who have betrayed the trust of the public and their colleagues shows that they're not afraid to challenge such behaviour. So that's the two questions that have been asked by the member of the public. They've been provided to the Commissioner's office, and I understand there may be a response forthcoming from the Chief of Staff, Lee. Is that right, Commissioner?
Well, I think in the first instance, if I can make a couple of comments, and Lee may add to the detail. It never ceases to amaze me how police officers who have an understanding of the nature of investigations and the consequences of behaving illegally or breaching discipline, nevertheless behave in a way which appears quite extraordinary. But that happens. And of course, South Wales Police has over 5,000 employees, even after the impact of the reduction in staff numbers. And I think it's always important to understand that there is due process that has to be followed whether it's a matter of prosecution or it's a matter of disciplinary action. One of the things that I learned in the 15 years up until 1987, when I sat in court as a magistrate, was that there is no substitute for hearing the full evidence that's available in the court or that is available in the disciplinary proceedings. There are occasions on which reports may be accurate in what they say, but may not carry the full flavour of the evidence that's available to the magistrates that are sitting in court, or the people who are taking a disciplinary action, or indeed myself, if I'm dealing, for instance, with the forfeiture of pensions, which sometimes happens, quite frequently happens, after a prosecution of a police officer and a dismissal of police officers. So I learned then the care with which you have to undertake before making comments on what is said in the public domain to make sure that you understand the full flavour and have availability of the full information that's available on a particular case. You'll see in the letter that's quoted there the fact that disciplinary action was ongoing, that officers who are found not guilty because of the very clear and important level of proof that is required for a conviction in a court of law may still face misconduct hearings, or indeed a gross misconduct hearing, and those processes are governed by very specific regulation and legislation. So it's not a question of me being happy, it's a question of what is the right response to any particular set of circumstances that lead to disciplinary action, misconduct hearings, and indeed the way in which issues are responded to when there's a complaint that's presented to the police. What I am convinced of is that both in terms of my team and the work that Lee undertakes in his oversight of the regulatory side of my responsibilities within the team, and the professional standards department of South Wales Police, pursue the highest standards and are probably the highest in the 52 years that I've had contact with South Wales Police since it came into existence in the first place. So, Lee, are there specifics that you'd like to add to the issues that have been raised?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, panel. Dealing with it in reverse again, I suppose just to echo the comments that the Commissioner's made there, obviously in relation to that latter case, the Commissioner and none of us actually have jurisdiction over the court decision. So, but the point that there is a disciplinary process in place and potentially a gross misconduct hearing is an important point that we shouldn't interfere with that process. As part of then moving on, that sort of linked to the latter end of Mr. Jenkins's other letter of complaint. If I take Gemma Dick's comment there, and as the Commissioner has effectively commented already, but an officer who goes through a gross misconduct process that is dealt with via a panel, which is an independent legally qualified chair. There will also be an independent lay member, and their decision, as the Commissioner sort of indicated, will be based on all of the evidence in front of them, and each case will be judged on its own merits, and they would have found an independent decision. They would make a decision on that. So from our perspective, from a Commissioner's perspective, it's obviously we're very keen that that there is a fair, open, transparent process, that it's followed the legislation and the guidance. As we say in this case with gross misconduct cases, that will require a very comprehensive and thorough process. of which I can assure the panel that was the case with PC Dix. That's not to say, that we might not always be happy with the conclusion of it, but that's the process that you need to follow each time, and that was done in this case. In relation to the panel, there's been a formal response from Professional Standards Department in relation then to the former part of Mr. Jenkins's letter in relation to Police Constable Sally Thomas, who was dismissed from South Wales Police, and his questions there. Rather than read the whole letter out, I think the key point in answer to his query, the Professional Standards Department confirmed that the matter is more complex than Jenkins suggests, as already highlighted. Without having witnessed the whole process, you often don't necessarily know all of the detail. But there will certainly not be an automatic overturning of any convictions. Where thought necessary, there will be a review of previous cases, and this will be conducted on a case-by-case basis, depending on the nature of the alleged dishonesty. It should be noted that ex-PC Sally Thomas has been dismissed based on the balance of probabilities, whereas individuals are only convicted at a criminal court where the evidence is beyond reasonable doubt. Should any party raise a concern regarding a conviction, either from an external source or internal review, then there would be a necessity to consult with our joint legal services and Crown Prosecution Service. However, the force would do this on a case-by-case basis where required. And then latterly, they addressed that they can't comment on the issue about whether Mr. Michael is happy with PC Gemma Dix's remaining as a police officer, but I think we've just covered off that point. So it's a fairly brief matter. What I would add to that as well, obviously Mr. Jenkins does correspond directly with the Professional Standards Department on a frequent basis, with yourselves and with ourselves, and as you can tell from the correspondence there, we do respond each time. The panel did have a fuller briefing note or summary of the force's response to police officers allegedly using their position for sexual gain. And just to reiterate one of the points made there, the anti-corruption unit within South Wales Police undertake a number of activities to ensure there's that any evidence of that is picked up and acted on as soon as possible, which is why actually, in one sense, the reflection of these high-profile cases in the media are a consequence of some of that proactive work. So, Commissioner Simon, that's in essence the response that we can provide to those questions.
Thank you, Lee. I think you've already sent me a copy of the Professional Standards Department briefing note on that, and that will be sent to Mr. Jenkins. I'll also send him a link to the recording of this meeting so he can listen to the words of the Commissioner and to yourself. So thank you for that. Chair, back to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. This report, in actual fact, is for information, and it's only a report that we need to consider. Can I have a move that we just accept this report, please?
Happy to move.
Chair.
Thank you, and a second. Very kind. Thank you so much. This leads us to any other business deemed urgent by the chair, and I can say that at the moment I've received no urgent. Oh, I'm sorry, Jane. I can see that Councillor Jane Cowan, you were indicating you'd like to speak. My apologies.
Sorry, it was just to say that I was going to propose the report again. That was all.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that, Jane. On that basis, I've not been informed of any other business that needs our urgent attention. So, in actual fact, we have reached the end of the agenda. May I take the opportunity to thank everybody that has attended, and in particular the Commissioner and his team. And can I take this opportunity of wishing you all a very happy Christmas. I hope you all have a safe and a healthy Christmas, and let's all look forward to next year in the hope that the vaccine will actually give us the light at the end of the tunnel and life can get back to normal, certainly during the spring of next year. Thank you all for your support this year, and I hope to see you all in the new year. happy, smiling, refreshed, fit and healthy. So everybody, thank you so much.
Can I thank you
Chair.
for
Thanks,
your
Richard.
good
Happy
wishes
Christmas,
and
everyone.
reciprocated
Yeah.
the same.
Christmas.
Chair.
Thank you. Merry Christmas all. Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Right.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.